Okay, so I'm delighted to have this opportunity to welcome some new colleagues visiting us here on the Hursley site, some awesome people from the magnificent structure that is Cloudant Towers from Bristol. So gentlemen, welcome.
Hello.
Can I quickly go around the table and ask you to introduce yourselves?
I'm Mike, the developer advocate, polyglot developer and hacker at large.
I'm Kim Stibble. I work on documentation for Cloudant, but I'm not supposed to say documentation anymore because Cloudant is a document database.
I'm Simon Metzen. I'm their chauffeur. And I make the tea.
I'm John McNamara. I work for IBM messaging and I'm an information architect.
Cool. So, first question to ask: what is Cloudant?
Oh, Adrian.
I thought you was Adrian.
Yeah. To be fair, we ought to point out that I'm a new member of the Cloudant team, so I've only been working with Cloudant for about 2 weeks. So Cloudant is
A document database available via a very simple HTTP RESTful API. We store JSON data, and the key thing is that we run it as a service, so our customers don't have to provision hardware, they don't have to worry about sort of monitoring or alerting on their cluster, and we can scale those things to sort of hundreds of nodes, hundreds of terabytes of data, and we do it. Cloudant was around for about 6 years prior to acquisition by IBM. We had sort of lots of kind of small games companies that kind of grew very, very large. They'd sort of launch games that were very successful and suddenly have millions of people playing it, and then that would be a headache. So we help those kind of companies kind of scale up, and as well as doing sort of the fun consumer end, we've also been doing stuff with sort of banks and biotech companies and things like that. So people that have kind of a scaling data problem where their time to market is a key thing, they want to be quick, they want to be agile, and not have to run it themselves. That's the sort of thing that we go after. We've been running on SoftLayer from day one, so there was kind of a nice, for want of a less business word, synergy.
Ting!
everybody have a drink.
There's a bingo card. Two little ducks there, so that's kind of nice. We're big fans of SoftLayer, know them well, we're now part of IBM and kind of navigating what that means. In the UK, we've got about I think about 25 people now, most of whom are in Bristol, apart from when they get driven up to Hursley. We've got a guy in Aberdeen and another one in Windsor, and then a few people kind of, mainly salespeople, kind of work remotely and kind of come in. And Adrian works everywhere.
Yeah,
He does.
yes. I fly in.
On his personal jet. Come work for Cloud and you get a jet. No, it's not true. Cool.
So one of the things that I picked up on very early when I joined the team was the difference between traditional database technologies, your relational databases, that sort of thing, where you have a very, very well-defined structure, the schema, in contrast to something like the document-oriented database structure of Cloudant. And the way that I like to describe that is it's a bit like the difference between a spreadsheet model for the relational database where you've got your rows and your columns, you've got a very well-defined structure, versus something like, dare one say it, a collection of post-it notes, where you've got a unique ID on each post-it note, but what you choose to put onto the post-it note is entirely up to you. It could be text, it could be media, it could be a graphic image, something like that. Is that too simplistic a representation, do you think? Or?
It's not a bad one. I think that the thing with spreadsheets is that if you're not careful, I can have a relational table that's got 5 columns, and I can have a spreadsheet that's got 500, right? And spreadsheets, I like to think of spreadsheets as the first NoSQL database, actually, because you can really abuse a spreadsheet.
I like the way you said that.
Thorough thrashing.
Right. I mean, there can be, you can stick an image in a cell, you can have music playing it, you can write sort of custom code and stuff. And whilst columns 1 through 4 might have a schema, name, age, address, postcode. I can then put in row 5 hair colour that's there or not there. Row 10 is car that's driven as well. So actually, the individual rows, there might be some structure, but it's not guaranteed across all of the rows. And that's actually very much like a document store where my application might make sure that name and age is always recorded for a person document, but then I might have an application where someone can tag it as a friend, or another piece of the documents in the database might be tagged as sort of with addresses or whatever. And so then I've got this there's some structure there. It's not completely unstructured data, but there's also fuzzy bits where it may or may not exist, and that's something that relational stores either don't like or don't perform well if you are taking that to the extremes kind of thing. And that's sort of where Cloudant fits kind of nicely, I think.
Okay.
So the Postnote's not a bad one, because it could also be completely, like I could have a million documents about a million different things with completely a million different schemas essentially. But a spreadsheet's kind of a nice kind of halfway house between a Post-it note and a relational table.
Cool. So for our listener, problem.
What's his name?
He doesn't know
actually
to
John's
listening.
mum.
So for our listener,
His voice.
if you had to encapsulate the problem that Cloudant solves in one sentence, could you do that?
So I think the thing that Cloudant does uniquely is take this whole kind of NoSQL world and kind of bundle it up and run it as a completely managed cloud delivered service.
Wow. Okay.
And that's something that I think is actually quite special. It's quite interesting. The technology under the hood is built on lots of open source technologies, and we have a large kind of contributor base back to those projects, which is nice. And that stuff is interesting, but it's not actually. I think that's not the unique piece of it. The unique piece is that we've got this business model that is cloud, and we've worked out a way of doing both the kind of long tail pay as you go, people spending $5 a month, to the people spending $250,000 a month,
right? And
being able to sort of span that scale point is actually that's the interesting piece, I think, for me.
Understood.
And I think that was the bit that IBM was interested in.
Yes.
They like that one.
Me too.
So yeah, it's that kind of the core technology underneath it is the thing that empowers that, but the thing that's unique is that it's the service.
So Mike, your role is developer advocate. What does that involve?
As far as I have been able to realise, it's instead of speaking to CIOs and the more management perspective, it's talking to developers and helping them understand and enabling them to become advocates of the technology as it is. So being able to bring the concept of document data stores to developers and for use of a clustered multi-tenant version. But yeah, introducing the technology to more and more developers, because at the moment it's only been the last 3 years that document data stores and NoSQL has been actively used by development. I believe the longest standing Mongo company in the UK, Server Density, has only been running that in anger for 2.5 years. So there's still a huge amount of education that requires to be done at that level.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that the UK definitely is about 18 to 24 months behind adoption on NoSQL stuff. There were certainly some early adopters, so LastFM used Hadoop very early on. There are certainly people in the UK that are building fun things on or with, working for companies like Cloudant, Cloudera, Hortonworks, all that people in Bristol even, because Bristol's brilliant and everyone should move there. I get a kickback from the council. Discount on my council.
You're the tourism board of Bristol.
Yeah, it's that bad now. But I think in terms of sort of adoption by companies, we're a bit behind than the US, and it's just sort of Silicon Valley brain drain type problem, I think, possibly. But what's nice is that it's becoming more normal. People are picking it up, and software sort of downstream from the database is starting to exist. So people are building CRMs on top of a NoSQL store, and so suddenly someone chooses a CRM and they get the NoSQL store whether they like it or not, kind of thing, and then they learn all the fun, interesting properties of their thing that may or may not do what it wants. But there's and so the advocacy role, having people that can go out and sort of to what our business unit leader calls speak geek to people and do that kind of grassroots thing is actually a really important part from how we grew Cloudant in the US. We certainly saw that kind of going bottom up was a very, you can get people interested in the technology and then they'll solve the management problem.
It does seem to be a more common model now, doesn't it? In the old days, you would have a salesperson go in and convince the higher people that this was a solution to their problems, and then it would percolate down into a technical implementation. That's almost been completely inverted.
And the interesting thing is that we're seeing budgets move out of. So the person who has the budget for some compute might be in the marketing department, and their budget that they want to spend is, say we've got an event in 6 months' time or 6 weeks' time. We've got $100,000 to spend for this event. We want to build an app for that event, showcasing blah. Right? It's a throwaway thing, and then because it's a short window between making that decision and the event is fixed in time. If you've got a 12-week procurement process in there and you've only got 6 weeks to the event, then people start saying, well, IT's too slow, right? And so that's where cloud providers have sort of capitalised, right? What IBM's, I think, thinking about is how to say, well, actually, we can bridge the gap between your CMO, who's spending money on things that IT department doesn't like, and your CIO, who's desperately trying to wrangle stuff and make sure that, if the crown jewels piece of data accidentally snuck out because your CMO's kind of paid the wrong kind of company or whatever, then that's a problem for the CIO, not the CMO. And so having IBM be able to say, well, here's ways of making both kind of groups happy. That seems to be kind of a nice thing.
Yeah, cool. So, Kim, you work on the documentation. How did you get to join Cloudant? What was your background, your experience before joining?
Before I joined Cloudant, I was working as a contractor, and in that role, as a software developer, and used CouchDB quite a bit. So I already had the technical knowledge. I had also worked as a technical writer, so that fit kind of nicely with Cloudant. I worked from Germany as a contractor for a while, and then after some time, I decided to
forced
got the
into
offer.
and I got
Nice
10%
offer
kickback from the council for it. So.
Wow.
Not from Germany, I think.
No, I'm not allowed to go to Germany. They want Kim back. So I think IRC evolved and was basically because that was how the open source CouchDB project. So you can probably say Cloudant is based on top of CouchDB. That's kind of the core piece of the document store. And so most of our DB core committers came to us through the CouchDB project. So they were working on Couch in their spare time or a previous employer, and then Cloudant sort of said, hey, would you like to do this for money? And quite a few people have, since joining Cloudant, got the commit bit on the Apache project as well. So that's a nice thing. And yeah, IRC is the way that community communicates, and so we've sort of carried that over, I think. And it's also a fairly common kind of way for